Stop right there if you want to make a great fantasy movie, because there are some big cliches out there in fantasy movies that you need to avoid. But today, we're covering the worst ones. Coming up. Hello everyone, James Martin here. I'm here to help you filmmakers to not only make your movies better, but also to help you succeed in your career. Today, we're covering the top 6 biggest cliche in fantasy movies. And why is this important? Well, because if you're someone like myself who wants to make some fantasy movies, then you ought to avoid these. Otherwise, your movie is going to look just like a lot of these other ones. So to make your stand out, please make sure you don't do the following cliches. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of these cliches once or twice if you're a fantasy movie buff like myself. So I'm sure we can look out for some of these big cliches. But right now, we're covering the top 6 big cliches we see in a lot of different fantasy movies. Starting with number 1, when the parents are killed. Because we all know it would be a real downer if your child protagonist gets called upon this big adventure, big epic story, and the parents say to him,
"Don't you go on that quest, you better come straight home."
That would be a real downer. This happens all the time, and there's a reason why it's used. But if you want your movie to stand out, then make sure you don't get your parents, well, killed off right away. Number 2, and this one I dread with a passion, and that is the chosen one trope. The problem with the chosen one is that you already know how the story is going to play out, and then the chosen one is usually backed up by some prophecy of some sort. Well, what that means is you have your hero that's destined to defeat the villain. Well, then there's no pressure. You know that the hero is going to eventually defeat the villain. And then when you have the chosen one, that means nothing bad can happen to them, right? It's like when you have Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars, who's essentially the chosen one to bring balance to the Force. Well, we all know that nothing too bad's going to happen to him. It might have cost him an arm and a leg. The problem with the chosen one trope is that it's used all the time. It's already predictable. Try and find other alternatives around that, just because this cliche is used literally all the time. Number 3 are big, glorious, epic battles. And don't get me wrong, who doesn't like a really juicy battle? Here's the problem. So there's this idea of tension, okay? Think of tension like an elastic, okay? If you pull the elastic slowly over time, you'll be able to stretch the elastic further and further and further. If you pull it right away, it's going to snap. Same thing with tension. And why does tension matter? Because that's what's going to build up to this battle. If a battle just happens right away, then it's not really that fun. It's just eye candy at this point. It's great for the trailer. It's like, oh, this is an epic battle. Well, a lot of the problem is that this battle could honestly have been taken out of the story, and the story would just continue on its own, and that becomes a big problem. I'm talking about the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland remake. I'm talking about the Nutcracker and the Four Realms, where a battle is insisted for no reason whatsoever. Sometimes you don't need a battle. You can create a fantasy story where maybe there's just a small fight. Well, in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, there isn't a huge, massive battle. As a matter of fact, it's the complete opposite. It's actually the Fellowship, like 8 people, and they're just fighting off some monsters, some urukai. But that's it. It's just the small group. It's not until we get to the second movie, then we get into a much, much bigger battle. Ask yourself if a battle in your very first movie is really that necessary, and if you can just take it out. Because I would suggest make a movie the way it is, and then save the battle for movie number 2. Because especially with that, you're going to have just enough time where you can build up the perfect amount of tension for a bigger battle. And again, going back to The Lord of the Rings, perfect example, where in the Fellowship of the Ring, there's a very small fight between the main cast. When we get to number 2, yes, in the Two Towers, we have the Battle of the Hornburg, where we have 10,000 urukai against the men and the elves. So it's just slightly bigger and juicier. Then we get to the full-out war against Gondor in The Return of the King. Huge, massive battle with almost 1 million orcs against all the realm of men. And of course, Rohan comes in as well. It's big and it's glorious. It sends goosebumps up my spine. But that's because they've had 3 movies to build up to this massive battle that's taking place. So just think about that next time you really want to throw in a battle, because oftentimes it's not that necessary. The third one is when your character masters skills that they should really work towards and earn, not just automatically get it. Force Awakens. This is exactly what it means. Creed is a perfect example where you have a character who he wants to be a boxer, and he does a decent job at boxing because that's his main passion. In the beginning of the movie, he goes into a ring, he's looking for a coach, no one's taking him seriously, so he's like, okay, well guess what, I can go in a ring and I can beat all of you guys up. He fights his first opponent, which he knocks down easily with like the greatest of ease. And then a professional wants to go in the ring, and Creed, this character, is like, okay, well, I'll beat you too. Sure enough, he gets the wind knocked out of him in one punch. But then he meets up with his trainer, and throughout the movie he trains on how to become a much better fighter. And in the end, when he does the fight, actually he technically doesn't win, he actually ties, but it's much further than in that first fight where he just took one punch and he was down. That's what needs to happen. And when you have movies like Star Wars The Force Awakens, you have the character Rey, the main character, who's automatically good at fighting with a lightsaber and is automatically good at dealing with the Force. That's a problem because it's cheap, it's not earned. Okay, and this is a big difference from another great example, Avatar The Last Airbender. You have Aang, who's already good at airbending, but also needs to master the skills in all the other elements, and he can't do it on his own. So over the course of the entire show, he learns how to master all the elements, and by the end of it, he's already earned the right to become a really great fighter. He knows how to use all of them to his advantage. Make your characters earn their skills and earn their place to become a really cool hero. This one, number 5, I see very often essentially vague explanations. According to honest trailers, they often refer to this as either magical mumbo jumbo or scientific mumbo jumbo. What is this? Is when a character explains something with no context whatsoever. Just a bunch of word vomit that you have no idea what they're talking about. This comes to explaining a magic system. This comes to explaining how this form of science works. And when they're just saying stuff that we honestly don't even have a clue of what the heck's going on. And it just helps that we all understand so we can all be on the same page. And the worst offender of this, I am sorry, but that comes from season 2. Oh my goodness. If you just go into something very vague in general that no one can follow, that's exactly what's going to happen. No one's going to follow, and they're going to be bored, and they're going to be tuning out of your movie.
Imagine that this line represents time. Prior to this point in time, somewhere in the past, the timeline skewed into this tangent, creating an alternate 1985. Alternate to you, me, but reality for everyone else.
Last one, and the really, really biggest offender, in my opinion, is romance that's there for the sake of romance. And why? Because romance tends to bring in a female audience. And if you have a movie that's primarily aimed towards the men, then you want to cash in a little bit by trying to bring in all the women. And typically, women are more likely to see romance than men who prefer watching action. And it's not that men can't enjoy romance and women can't enjoy action or whatever. It's just, this is statistically what happens, okay? But it's a big problem when you throw in a romance for no reason whatsoever. I literally roll my eyes every time I see a couple of the heroes, typically they're kids or teens, when they just make out for the sake of, and it doesn't do anything for the plot whatsoever. Big offender of this, the Karate Kid remake with Jaden Smith. The whole point of the movie is to him to build up confidence and to show that he's not going to be afraid to stand up, and especially to stand up to a bully. The romance makes no sense whatsoever. Another great offender, Newsies. Now, if you've ever watched Newsies, the movie, I love the movie. I thought that movie was fantastic. It does have a couple issues with the singing and the dancing, but for a movie in the 90s and getting a couple people to do some very simple dancing and singing, I think it's great. I love it to death. When they transformed it into a Broadway musical, one of the main characters, who was originally a man, they threw in a woman. And they did that for the purpose that the main characters could all have a romance happening. And sure enough, that's what happens. You could literally take the romance out of it. It doesn't change the story whatsoever. Think about what the romance actually means to the character. Here's some other reasons. Maybe you have a character who's really bad, maybe they had a shady lifestyle, and you have a female character that sees the good in them. And therefore, they want to become good for their sakes. They think that that female character can help them become pure. Think of movies like Beauty and the Beast, for instance. So please, please, please don't just throw romance for the sake of. Find a very important way that the romance could serve your story. Otherwise, if it doesn't really serve the plot, take it out. So I really hope this helped you out. If it did, please smash that like button. Make sure you don't make these really often cliches. But I'm also just curious, are there any other cliches that I left off this list? Please let me know down in the comments, because that's going to help everyone too. And also make sure you subscribe, because I got brand new videos coming out every single week. And make sure you look in the description, because I got new merch. Yes, we are also selling merchandise. Make sure you check that out, because every time you purchase from the merchandise, that also comes to helping me, supporting my channel, so I can continue doing this and even do bigger projects too. Again, all to help you guys out. So good luck with your writing and your movies, and I will see you next time.